welcome to another episode of Sarva Gunn Sampann. Thank you so much for joining me. It's my honor to invite a guest to the show today who values humanity above everything else, including nationality, religion, ethnicity, gender, caste. She embraces diversity and inclusion and is consciously always promoting an equity mindset. Some of her strengths include her sense of autonomy and independent thinking, living life on her own terms, and loving Zindagi in all its facets. She is able to connect with people anywhere from any part of the world. She loves to read, loves to travel, and loves to share her learning with everyone. Please join me in welcoming Tasneem Lokhandwala to the show. Tasneem, so glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Anu, for inviting me to this platform. And oh boy, that was high praise from you. Thank you so much. I remember you reached out to me almost, 2 months ago when you were just like laying the foundation of this project. And you asked me if I would be your guest. I felt then exactly what I'm feeling today, which is humbled as I have watched a few of your episodes and heard your guests. And I feel honored to be in such esteemed company. So I applaud you for taking on this unique initiative to highlight the women of our community. And that's really unique and very commendable. So thank you again for inviting me to this.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine, Tasneem. We'll get started with our first segment, which is all about your childhood. Would love to go back in time with you, have you open that little time capsule and tell us what little Tasneem was like growing up.
Oh, I could write a book on my childhood. I grew up in a very large extended family, even though we were a nuclear unit, like my parents and siblings, but we were always surrounded by aunts and uncles and cousins and friends. And honestly, I belong to a very vibrant, very involved, often nosy, but a very caring neighborhood in a very small city called Udaipur, City of Lakes. So, my neighbors could ask me where I was. Like if I would come home a little late from college, they had every right to ask me that. And I had to respectfully answer to them. I mean, that's how close-knit that whole community was. Our house was always filled with visitors coming in for a cup of tea, sometimes to share social and political news of the town, or to seek advice and free counseling from both sets of my parents, as well as my grandmother. And sometimes they would come also to seek monetary help. Not that we were very, well-to-do. We were middle-class family, but they had less than us. So I, growing up, watched and listened, all these people coming to talk, and those interactions that they shared with my parents and grandmother kind of shaped a lot of the value system I uphold as an adult. In my house, I have a little Native American saying, I think it is, to our children, we can give two things. One is roots, the other is wings. My family gave me both in abundance. So my father, he gave me solid grounding in religion, spirituality, languages, and literature. So he knew like about 6 languages, including Persian and Arabic. And we had a house full of books. So my summers were spent reading Shakespeare, like the full works in Old English, Bernard Shaw plays, 100, the world's greatest short stories, 100 Wise Men. I mean, all kinds of books that my father had, amazing collection. And then I also, he had taught me, he used to get Persian, Russian, and Gujarati magazines at home. So vicariously, that's how I learned to read Gujarati, as well as, of course, Urdu I learned from him, and to read a little bit of Persian. I understand a few phrases, let's put it that way, but I do read Gujarati fluently. And I learned a little bit about the Russian culture. Of course, it was an English magazine, so we read that. And many of Urdu, Hindi, and English authors that he had a collection of. We also, I mean, if we are talking about my dad as an influencer in my life, I would say it is simple living and high thinking, right? And commitment to social service. That's what I saw growing up from my dad. Then these two amazing, phenomenal ladies in my life, my grandmother, my nanny, and my mom, who were trailblazers in their own unique way. Because I got the legacy of complete autonomy, confidence, grace under pressure, happy go lucky attitude towards life, the grit, their kindness, their charity, their leadership, and integrity. And believe it or not, an unapologetic but 100% commitment to higher education for women. So these two women did not have formal school education beyond middle school themselves, but they made sure that their children and grandchildren all ended up being professionals. So women in my family all had careers. My grand was a feminist of the 60s. Because in that small town, she was a widow, very young widow. And for her to make sure that all her children and grandchildren went to school and college, it's just commendable when I see the time in which she was raising us. And they traveled, both of them, my mom and grandmother, all over the world alone. And they were excellent communicators, no matter which part of the world you place them, no matter what subject you are talking about. So through an association called Bunayat. Bunayat is an Urdu word, which means young women, actually. And it's a gathering of young women. So this association was something both my grandmother, my mom, and my aunts, actually, they all not only belonged to it, they were active participants. And they empowered the poor women in our community to start and hold their own small businesses. So they gave us a very solid grounding in accepting differences. And then the most beautiful part of my childhood was the fact that I grew up in Udaipur, which is a very, very secular city. I had Hindu friends like Rajput and Jain and Mathurs and everything, like who came to actually Dargah with me to the mosque and the shrine. They actually did Roza, the fasting during Ramadan with me. And I did the same. I did all their vrats sometimes. Like my closest friends, I did their vrats. I even did try to do the Jain Pajution. And I found that tougher than the 30 days of fasting of Ramadan, because they go even without water for 48 hours. And I went with them to Shiva Vishnu temple, to Hanuman temple, to churches. And very recently, I visited Amritsar Golden Temple. And so we grew up celebrating each other's festivals, understanding each other's religion. What are the basic tenets? What do we believe in? And we learned open-hearted acceptance and inclusion from each other. Then I went through a convent school education. So needless to say, I know a lot about discipline and punishment because I got in frequent trouble with the nuns. I naturally rebelled against dogma and rules and any kind of restraint or constraint on my autonomy, even then. So school was always easy for me. So I got good grades, but I was not a very disciplined student until I was in college. That's when I became a very sincere student. And I remember growing up playing gulli danda and cricket and bicycling around the town. And as we grew older, we had a moped and you would go to the lakes. So there was that fun element in our childhood, which I sometimes feel our children kind of missed out on it. I'm not saying they didn't have fun. They had fun in different ways, but like that whole idea of hanging around with neighborhood kids, those kind of things didn't happen for them when they grew up here. So my school also gave me a solid foundation in standing up for myself, speaking up against injustice, knowing my purpose in life, and honestly understanding the basic tenets of all the major religions. Because my first lessons in religion came from my school. Our convent school taught us about it, right? In elementary and middle school, I learned about Buddhism and Jainism and Christianity and all that. So it kind of widened our horizon. And then if you talk about influencer, the last thing that I would talk about is the leaders, the authors, the poets, and the music that early on influenced me came from a mix of my own home, from my school, and from my friends. So these are like children books from Enid Blyton, Agatha Christie, Malgudi days, if you remember, then Amar Chitrakatha. Those were when we were kids. But then I got into like serious reading as I grew older, into Leo Tolstoy, Anton Chekhov, and Munshi Premchand, Mirza Ghalib, Amir Khusro, Rumi, Khalil Gibran, Francois Sagan. Oh my God, so many authors. Ayn Rand, one of my favorite, and Alex Haley, to just name a few. But also leaders like whose autobiographies I started reading. I didn't finish all of them, but I learned a lot about them in school too, was Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, and Tagore. I truly still read a lot of things about those three. I mean, and I truly believe in the kind of initiatives that they had. I really applaud. I mean, personally have a connection with that. And so they did expand my world and my beliefs too. And I was a very voracious reader and used to listen to All India Radio too, growing up. But television was not a part of her life. If I'm not mistaken, Anu, I think television in India came in probably early 1960s, late 1960s. But in Udaipur, the first television transmission began in late 70s. So I basically was a college student before I even saw a television. So yeah, these were my influences.
And you really painted a picture of a golden era. And we'll move on to our next segment, which is Ye Kahaan Gaye Hum. This is the onward journey. And we're now looking at the college and more formal education, the post-secondary education.
Kahaan Gaye. What a beautiful way to describe that phase of her life, right? And anyway, it's a great song. So I love it. So speaking of after school, right? After high school, I was a NTS scholar, through the NCRT. So it was funded and all. So I completed my undergrad in psychology, geography, and English literature. From an all-girls college. I went to an all-girls school and I went to an all-girls college. And then when I chose to do masters in psychology, my mom was so unhappy. Like she told me there is no future, no scope of a great career in psychology, because honestly, in that time in India, psychology was in its infancy. It was like a brand new college level subject. So, well, I proved her wrong. I went on to do masters in clinical psychology and then PhD in psychology. And I started teaching psychology at St. John's Shore Hospital in Bangalore, because those were the only two things you could do. You could either teach in college or you could actually work in the university labs. But like there were no psychologists in schools, there were no psychologists in clinics at that time. So, so I started teaching there. And then I found out that there was a research institute in Mumbai, and it was one of its kind. It was called the Jai Vakil School for Disabled Children and Adults. So they not only had school for disabled children, they had a workshop, which was kind of for the adults with disability in that. And they did a lot of research with cytogeneticists and pediatricians and psychologists. So I worked there as a research investigator. So before I came to United States. And this is the story of how I ended up here. I got married in 1988, and I was an idealist. Felt very strongly about the brain drain from India. So I had a lot of family members who had come to America and Europe, and I didn't want to do that. And so I said, no, I'm never going to leave India. And as I was idealist, and I truly believed in him. So lo and behold, 2 years after our marriage, ours was an arranged marriage, and my husband's family, nobody had stepped out of the country. So I felt, wow, this will be perfect, right? 2 years after our marriage, my husband tells me that, I always wanted to go to United States for further studies. And I actually refused to go with him. So I stayed in India. I continued to work at Jai Vakil School, and he came along. I didn't come. I said, well, you go, you finish your studies and come back. And then, of course, eventually I followed. And he just kept telling me that come and see the lifestyle here and just at least come for a visit. And you have a whole family here. And so I came. And well, we all know who changed whose mind, right? And then few things that fascinated me instantly about the USA were the cleaner air comparatively. But I hated the snow. I love the system of education. That ability to debate, to discuss, and to disagree with your professors. That was something new. We never could do that in India. We were very traditional in British method of teaching where the teachers talk and we write, right? So that ability to have that conversation, it was very fascinating for me. But I disliked the subtle disrespect and disregard of teacher as the expert. I noticed that some of my colleagues would speak very rudely, and that kind of didn't go well with me initially. And then I love the opportunities for success if you're willing to work hard in this country. But I did not care for the toxic culture in the workplace because, and I'm sure that happens in India too, but there were places where I would least expect and it would be there. And I found that a little hard. I love the fact that I had a voice and a choice in my decisions, right? So the independent thinking and basically freedom, more freedom, but often miss the collaborative practices and the interdependence of decision making from India. So, there was, it was like I was half here, half there. And that would be natural when you are going through that acculturation process. You initially can give up everything from your traditional culture. So for any immigrant, right? I'm sure you all went through the same feelings that I did. And I think it was about the individualistic versus collectivist culture. There is good in both. And then there are some things that you don't care for in either one of those. So some of it was very liberating. Sometimes I felt lost and alone in the crowds. Sometimes I got scared, and sometimes it was just uncomfortable, but sometimes it was very empowering too. So there were times where I felt, oh, wow, I would never have done this in India. So that's how I look at my journey, that when I came here, there were some things that fit beautifully. And then there were other things that kind of I questioned. There was that wise. What are we doing here in this country? Like initially, I used to say that. Now my children are born and raised here. And I think when I go back to India, I'm always waiting to come back home. So it's like a second home away from home, right? And that's how I feel about it. Yeah. My greatest strength has always been connecting with other people. So I guess eventually the acculturation process became less daunting and more easy for me because I used to be able to switch between being at home and being at work and in social circles. I mean, I know it sounds funny, but like I still find myself going back and forth between what we call in psychology. There are two orientation, transitional orientation and the bicultural. So the transitional is where you are still connected with your traditional culture and you are just beginning to like a few things about the host culture. But bicultural is where you are very comfortable in either places. So even till today, I think when it comes to music, right, like Bollywood music, I don't think I can listen to English music for a long time. I do listen to it from time to time, but I fall back to my classical music, my semi-classical, and my Bollywood music. So that is very much a transitional cultural thing, right? That you are not able to accept I can look at the dance forms and the classical music forms here, but somehow at home, I would always fall back to listening to that. And then it comes to expectations from my children. I mean, I think I'm still deep down in my heart an Indian mom. I accept their thinking because, our children, they have their own thoughts and they have their own life. And so it's not that there is always going to be a generation gap. So it's not that I'm not accepting of their thoughts and all, but do I have questions inside? Yes, always. So in those cases, I feel I've not become a completely bicultural person. I've not embraced everything about the Western culture. But when it comes to, food, politics, religion, diversity, inclusion, and equity, books, and dress style, I think I can easily switch between being an American and being an Indian. When I go to India, I'm very much like an Indian when I come here. So that's easy for me. I can switch between the two. And when it comes to exposure to diverse thinking and lifestyles, India always has held a special place in my heart because we grew up surrounded by various ethnicities, multiple languages, so many religions all the time in school, everywhere, right? So I used to think, wow. And we were a secular country. So I thought we can never find a better example of diversity and inclusion. But when I came to US, honestly, that's when I met people from different nationalities. So in India, we did see a few nationalities here and there, like Britishers and some Pakistani and some Bangladeshi and all. But when I came to United States, in student housing itself at University of Iowa, I got exposed to like several countries from Europe, several countries from Middle East, like Jordanians, Syrians. These were friends and these were people who were going to classes with me. And there were students from like white, black, brown, Native American, right from here, the diversity within this country. And then also from Far East, like Malaysian, Indonesian, Bangladeshi. So it was kind of a little mini United Nations, I should say, that I got to get exposed to so many countries. So I and I learned from them like different political ideologies, different religious leanings too, but also their concept of child rearing, their concept of how to raise a family, the concept of what is acceptable and what is not. So when you hear from people from other countries and that that's what they pay more attention to or hold more valuable, your own horizon also expands, right? You become a little more egalitarian in your approach to diversity, that whole concept of. So I kind of appreciated that coming here. But what happened was when I was in my first year of postdoctoral specialization in school psychology, because that's what happened when I came here. And I'll talk about this when we are talking about my work. So when I was there, I came across a multicultural class, advanced, where we were supposed to bring people from different cultures who are least like us or we know the least about, and get really immersed with them, like get to know them, what they celebrate, and attend their functions and events. And then at the culmination of the class, we were supposed to bring whoever was our person or our contact from that culture to the class. That was the year I got to meet a person with a blind person. I got to meet for the first time a transgender person. I got to meet a homeless person for the first time, and in that particular classroom. And I got to meet people from the Amish culture, because different students brought different people as their culture. And I forgot about United Nations, and I started thinking about making connections, looking at alternative ways of connecting and communicating with people, learning to heal and connect. So my concept of diversity and inclusion, it grew to a different level, that it's not just about knowing about different cultures and all, but it's also about coming from a place of understanding, right? And accepting those people. So that's where, I feel coming to America led to a different growth in my lifestyle. And things that I had not, or subjects that I had not even addressed or seen in that very safe place in Udaipur. So coming here, it was that. And it was also the time that my husband and I were having 2 careers and raising our children. I'll be honest, it was exciting time, but it was also tough because we didn't have grandparents. We didn't have siblings. So we made sure that every long weekend, we took our children to like Philly or New Jersey, where my extended family was. We traveled a lot. Every 2 years, we would either go to India or another country. So I hope I gave them as good memories of childhood that I had growing up, because I was surrounded by so many people. So I made sure that they had experiences that were equivalent to that.
That's
And
all.
it also changed for us, Anu. If you know, the date, if I can remember, I think it was May 25th, right? In 2020, when George Floyd, and that 9 minute and 29 seconds video, it shook the world. So that was another growth spurt for all of us. The unconscious biases we have. And even us, the brown community, right? We have prejudices and we don't even realize. So that was a whole different growth spurt for me personally. Learning to recognize that, oh my God, do we, do that? I mean, there was so much discussion in my family with my girls. And thank God, both my girls are very, very, solid in their pursuit of learning about others and pursuit of understanding of equity and equality and how they are different and understanding. So having those discussions within the family, we felt like it was a whole different growth spurt. I mean, that's where, I always used to remember my grandmother. My grandmother used to say this one quote always, Sari kainat tumhara ashiana hai, which is like this whole world is your oyster. And it is life lessons that we get throughout our lives like this, which kind of makes that world feel like an oyster, because now you're becoming more compassionate and more understanding and more accepting of differences.
Yeah,
So
truly Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam that we call.
it's exactly that. Vasudev Kutumbakam, or you say Sara Kainat Tumhara Ashiana in Urdu.
We will move on, Tasneem, to our next segment, which is Kaam Ki Baat. I cannot wait to hear about the wealth of experience that you have in education and psychology and administration.
So I remember when it comes to work, see, I had PhD and I was already working full time in India. And then you come to this country and it's not that easy to just go and say, hey, I want to work here, right? For a lot of people who have had medical degrees, people who are, so a lot of people, even who are born and raised here in the United States, do not realize what immigrants from any country have to go through when they go to another country. But especially in the United States, there are very strict rules about what you have to do or what more education you have to get before you could, work just like them. So with my PhD, I still remember my first few experiences of blatant dismissal of my education and experience. There was a professor that I met, and I went and asked him that, hey, I have PhD in psychology. What could I do in the field of psychology at the university here? And just hearing my heavy accent, because I just come from India. I mean, I did have an accent. I used to think they have an accent until I realized I'm in their country. I'm the one with the accent. So, but he actually asked me to sit through his undergrad classes. I was like ready to pack everything and go back to India. But my husband said, one person said that you just meet another person. And luckily for me, I met a forensic psychologist from a community mental health center. This guy had gone to India. So he actually, the first thing he told me on the phone was, let's meet an Indian restaurant. And that in itself kind of warmed me to him. I said, wow, he's talking about Indian restaurants. So we went and met him. And with my background in clinical psychology and my work at the Jai Vakil School, I was a research investigator, right? He told me that in United States, with my PhD, I don't have to go back and do masters. I don't have to go back to school. He said you could do something called postdoctoral specialization in clinical psychology or school psychology. That's the first time I ever heard the word school psychology. There was no school psychology in India, right? I had heard of counseling and I had heard of clinical. So I was very fascinated and I asked him, what is school psychology? And then he explained to me that how every public school and even private school usually have a psychologists assigned to each building and the district. And then they do all this testing and figure out what the children's level of disability, what kind of disability it is. And then there are like all these federal definitions. The kids fall under one of the 13 definitions, but then they provide them all these services and interventions. My research in India, PhD, was all about handicapping conditions, and kids which, even physical handicapping conditions were not included in regular school at that time. They were all segregated, right? So I remember going to a UGC seminar in Delhi and speaking to the whole crowd and saying how shocked I am that in 1985, we had not yet figured out a way to include physically handicapped children. Forget about children with emotional and social. So to find this, that they are in every school and they are included. And then that this guy said that I said, I want to study school psychology. So yeah, I was 6 months pregnant and I took my GRE and TOEFL, studied for it for a couple of months in my pregnancy. It was fun. And I passed that and I applied for my postdoctoral and got into the program. And I did AP accredited internship from Houston Independent School District. Dr. Linda Abbey was an amazing person and we really became good friends. So I stayed with her and all. When I was at University of Iowa, I did an AP accredited internship from Houston, Texas. That's where I learned all. It was a large urban district and I was working primarily with very poor, very underserved kids. And these were the children this was the district where I learned crisis intervention. So for suicidal kids, for kids with very severe socio-emotional disturbance, neglect and abuse, right? So children, and I was like constantly on a little timer thing. So if we would get a 911 on that, that means we have to respond to this central office and they would tell us which school to report to. So it was pretty intense internship experience, but amazing supervisors. I learned a lot. And so my crisis intervention skills came from there. And I knew after working in strong, and I also did forensic psychology there. So I went to, juvenile detention center and worked with students who had committed heinous crimes, but I actually got to work with them and do their profile and all. So when I came to Ohio, my daughter was when I came to Ohio, my second daughter was 1. I applied only to Cleveland schools. I didn't even apply to suburbs. I said, well, no, I want to work in Atlanta. And of course, I met with them and I got the job and I was a school psychologist. Within a few months, within a few years, actually, a couple of years of school psychology, traditional, where I did testing and assessment and, IEP meetings and all that, I actually was selected through the Education Service Center to become one of the team leaders in the district, to go into all the schools and teach principals and leadership teams in every building, problem solving and collaborative problem solving. So teaming and problem solving for students with disabilities and for students with any kind of learning difficulty. So I moved into that. Then I became supervisor of psychologists. I think I worked as a supervisor for 5 years in Cleveland, taking care of like 85 some psychologists working under me. That was the time I wrote a grant, along with a large team of people, and we got our Reading First grant. I also was on several leadership committees for the district. That was a good time. And for personal reason as well as professional reason, Strongsville City School opened up position for supervisor of special ed. And I'm one of those people who loves to do something new, something different. Okay, I've done this. I'm now feeling saturated. Let's do something different. So I ended up coming to Strongsville, and which is a suburban district. They had resources, but lack of know-how. In Cleveland, I saw better know-how, but less resources. So it was kind of a nice fit and thoroughly enjoyed. Within 2 years, actually, the superintendent there called me. They changed my position and put me also as a curriculum RTI coordinator, which is curriculum and instructional support for early literacy. And that was my passion. I used to love teaching young teachers from early elementary how to recognize and diagnose learning difficulties and reading difficulties and how to intervene early on. And if we prevent reading failure before third grade, then, the children have an opportunity to have that, same level as other students in other, suburban districts and on. So I was very much a part of training and leading certain initiatives within Strongsville. I wrote a grant single-handedly. I was the primary writer and only writer, actually. And we got granted from the ODE department. And that was like, it brought multiple activities, and for the students, it brought, a lot of resources for the district. So that was pretty cool time. And I was enjoying the fact that I can actually single-handedly write a grant and it gets approved. So that was very good. After that, I ended up going to Shaker City Schools, and I was director of special ed there. And I worked there only for a year and a half. When you certain position, you can recognize whether it's a good fit or not. It was very good fit in many ways. I came across some excellent educators, but it was also a district that had a certain way of supporting their programs and special ed. And I was on a very different wavelength. And personally, I've always believed, this is my personal belief as a educator, that there are certain things that I value a lot, like children advocacy and child and parent advocacy. That is the strongest values that I've always held through. And if I ever feel that there might be a reason for me to compromise it for the benefit of the district, nothing wrong with that. Many districts do that. But if I felt that's not the right thing, then so I made a decision to go back to my favorite place in Cleveland. I ended my career. I took an early retirement 2 years ago after pandemic because of my health, but I ended going back to Cleveland. And I was working in a school that has 80% of special needs kids. So this is anywhere from anyone from medically fragile to autism, to multiple disabilities, to children with visual impairment, to children with hearing impairment, learning disabled, socio-emotionally disturbed kids, a lot of them actually in that area. And so I did both the curriculum and instruction initiative there, because I was doing the early literacy part, but also I wrote 2 grants within the 3 years, and both the grants were offered, and we even got like material like computers, which ODE rarely gives. But on that particular, the last grant I wrote, they even gave us that. So it was pretty good, feeling that every time I wrote, I've got it. And so, yeah, I worked there for 4 years, thoroughly enjoyed under 2 different principals. And I'm happy that I ended my career there, because that's where the parents need a lot of support and advocacy on their behalf. And so I found that I again found my niche again. But going to the suburbs was an equally meaningful experience, because you learn other things, right? That what do districts do when they have resources? And that's always a great knowledge to bring back. And there were certain things they did amazing. So you can bring that model back to a place where they might have a little less know-how for. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what my career has been. And I'm primarily working with special needs students, primarily supervising. And I also taught at the area universities. So I have taught multicultural interventions both at Kent State and at CSU, but I've also, in the graduate school psych program, I've also taught behavior interventions, I've taught systemic assessment, and I've taught response to intervention courses also. And then there was 1 year I taught at, what is that school near John Carroll? Not John Carroll, Ursuline. I taught special ed class there. So I've done that too. So one thing I might want people to hear, because they might think, oh, she just kept. When you move or when you change, and because you feel, okay, I've done my best here, now I want to do something different. And I was one of those folk. You don't pay attention to what you will get paid. And I always did not pay attention to that. My husband will tell you that I have very little sense for money, and it's okay. Money was never the thing for me. So there were times where I made decisions where I ended up getting paid less than what I used to make. And it didn't matter because I was doing the work that I enjoyed. So for me, it has always been like that, always. I mean, every single time. But there were times where I was very well and duly rewarded for doing that. So, it balances it out. So people who want to take risk, they should be willing to have that in the back of their mind, that sometimes it's not the money. Sometimes it's what you really are passionate about and want to earn. And then there are those who can't afford to do that. Then it's okay to stay in traditional job, because I have colleagues who have stayed doing just what school psychology, and they're doing beautiful, and they are actually at a point where they're doing leadership stuff also, and they're making very good money too. So it can be done both ways, but I chose to do it this way. So
in doing so, I think you've been stepping out of your comfort zone every single time.
every few years. And that kind of gave me a bigger and a wider network of people. I mean, I have still so many friends from all the districts I worked in, and I still connect with all of them. And there is beautiful friendships that I've created. And the networking is amazing also through your, your organization. So like I was always a member of the local, the state, national, and international. So I'm a member of CASP, Cleveland Association of School Psych, OSPA, the Ohio School Psych Association, NASP, which is national level, and ISPA, which is international. And I've never hesitated if any one of them asked me to present on a topic. I never said, oh, who wants to put the effort, or should I do it or not? I have always said yes. So I thoroughly enjoyed presenting at conferences too. So networking increases when you do stuff like that. And that's always a good thing you do for yourself, honestly, because you learn so much from meeting various people. So that I always feel that I become smarter with the company I keep, right? Not by myself. I can't do that in my own, sitting in my own cubicle. I have got to go and connect with people who are smarter than us. And that's how we learn and grow. So that's what
can impact by sharing all that knowledge and the
absolutely
that you have
sharing knowledge comes first and foremost. What's the point of knowledge? That's one wealth that if you don't share, you become poorer.
But the one question I do want to ask about is, for parents that have children who have special needs, what are some of the things that are critical to look for in school systems? If they're trying to enroll their kids, what are some things? Is it just the philosophy around special needs education? Or is it the resources? Or is there something
else? There are many resources. So first and foremost, anyone who has a child with disability or even suspect, they have to know that the federal law in the United States has given them protection. So they can go and talk to their pediatrician when the child is very, very young, has not yet gone to school, because this whole system of special ed starts with children at 0, like at birth. From birth to 3 years, a pediatrician can refer based on the symptoms or things that the parents are feeling that they can't see, and they can refer them to the area Head Start agencies. The Head Start agencies have their people, their social workers and everyone to do the assessment, and their assessment team, and they will do that. Sometimes a child falls through the crack and does not go through that system. But federal law requires that by age 3, every child should be identified by a school district for early intervention in preschool. So if a child has disability, and if a parent has even fallen through the cracks and never gone to they can still at age 3 call their school district and say, hey, I suspect something is not right for my child, and I would like you to assess. And a school district public school district is liable they have to, within 15 days, respond to the parents. Within 30 days, like send out the invitation to get them together and do what is called a prior written notice to say, hey, we will ask you some questions. We'll say whether really there is a suspicion of disability or not. And then there's a team, and it's called the preschool assessment team or clinic. Every public school district in every city has that. And they do the assessment, and they can tell what kind of services the child must need. So they could go to a preschool half day, full day, depending on the intensity of their disability, or they could get some support itinerant within the daycare that they are. So somebody's coming there once a week to provide speech services. Now that's from the school side. Does not mean a parent can't get therapy services if they can afford to. Some parents can. Then they have to base it, depend on the school district to provide everything. But some parents can, and there's nothing wrong in having a start on any private therapies. So there are many private speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, and school psychologists who will be willing to work with the parents and find out what's going on and provide them the services also. So the therapy services can be provided outside in clinics and all. Some insurance covers it, some insurance doesn't. So the parent have to figure that out. But the one thing they have to know, every parent who does have a child, especially those with severe disability, they go through a grief process, right? So when we grieve, we go through that denial, then anger, then acceptance, and then finally you are able to process it. So they have to know that a lot of emotions that they're feeling, a lot of things that they're going through, it's purely their way of handling their grief, right? So there's nothing wrong in the parent and the child and the family as a whole unit to seek therapy and to talk to somebody. It doesn't have to be a professional psychologist or a professional counselor. It could be finding the resources within the community. There are parent advocacy groups. There are parent groups that get together and talk about their children with them. Just like, we have Alcoholic Anonymous, right? For the people with, same thing is true for parents of children with disability. So I want parents to know that that's always available. And if they don't know, they can call their school district. Their school districts will give them those resources. Another thing is parents have to know that once a child is identified, there are a variety of services available within the school district. Sometimes they might want to go to a private school. Then the school district will tell them that what part of services are available at that private school. Now, they have to know that if they choose to go to a private school, they are giving up the services in the school district. However, they will get whatever the private school is providing it to them. But it's the same source of funding. The Ohio Department of Education will then kind of divide the dollar and give some amount to that private school where the child is. And there are two scholarships called JPS, John Peterson, and these are autism scholarship. So the parents, as the child grows older, they learn it through the district team. Usually teams are very open with parents and let them know what the options are. They also have a booklet from the Ohio Department of Education, but anywhere in the country they could go, and that booklet is called Whose Idea Is This? And now I think the name has changed, and I've retired, taken early retirement for the last 2 years, so I don't know what it is, but it's a link. And that kind of gives them step-by-step answers and the procedures, that what happens, how many days for the assessment, how many days before an IEP, an individualized education plan, is written for your child, how many days before the services start, when can you appeal a decision, when can you ask for mediation because you're not agreeing with how the district is providing services. So all that is in that booklet, and that can educate them for their own rights.
The impact that technology can make on this
absolutely.
area. And,
there are many technology resources too, which schools use too.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of schools that are using augmentative communication devices, but also programs that are on the internet that allows parent to, so then the child takes that tablet home. So the parents are communicating with the same verbiage that the teachers are, or vice versa. If there are clues that the parents are doing where the child understands, then they are sharing with the teachers. So yeah, I mean, there is so much advancement in technology help also for all these students. It's already part and parcel of the school system, but yeah, parents can find a lot of resources on their own, where they can provide that kind of one-on-one help and support for their children at home also.
Right, and that's my hope.
That was a good reminder.
It really narrows the gap between
Absolutely,
digital divide that we have in schools, where some schools have the resources and therefore the better program versus schools.
That's a whole different.
Yeah,
I could spend days on that.
We'll probably have you back
the
on
haves and the have-nots. It's sad. It's very sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why equity is one of my passionate subjects. Yeah.
We'll move on to our next segment, Tasneem, which is the X factor.
I'll base it based on what I've heard from my kids and from others in the family and friends. It's my ability to connect with anybody and everybody. And I truly am that. Like, I could be at the airport and have a very nice conversation with the lady who is in the bathroom cleaning, right? I can do that very easily. I can be at a coffee shop and talk to the barista, or I could be in a conference, or I could walk up to the keynote speaker at a conference without any hesitation. And just, if I need a question answered, I don't like. It has never occurred to me that there are permissions needed. If you want to talk to someone, you should be able to talk to someone. And there is never a thought in my mind that, oh, I can't talk to this person. Like, there is not. So I connect with human beings very well. And that's anywhere in the world. You place me on the plane. I mean, just last week when I was flying in, well, actually, the previous trip, I was flying back, and there were these two young gay men, of course, happily married to each other. And they had these two young children, one daughter and one son, that they had got through surrogacy. So one of them was sitting with me, and you know what? I found out practically everything because that's how, and he was talking so happily and sharing. And at the end of our trip, because we both were talking and there were a lot of people listening, and the lady behind me, who was an older lady, and I thought, okay, maybe we have kind of hurt her sensitivities because we were talking loud, quite a lot. And so but we were animatedly talking about life and children and everything. And he was talking about his young kids, and they were very adept at feeding their babies. And I was like impressed. I said, even a mother cannot do what you guys are doing. And that old lady actually stood up and asked the entire team to clap for these two, that these are the best fathers she has ever seen. So, I mean, moments like that kind of warm my heart. And, that we have come very far in understanding and accepting differences. So for me, that is one. But I'll be honest, personally for me, I like to write poetry. I like reading and singing. So I belong to these two clubs. It's called Hindustani Mehfil and a book club. And like, we meet once a month. I miss some mehfils, and I miss sometimes my book club also. In fact, sometimes I miss my book club a lot because of my travels. But at the mehfil, we share poetry, music, and literature. And at the book club, I get exposed to a variety of authors, because ours is not the kind where we read one book and everybody talks about it. We all read different books and we come and share. Mm-hmm. And then there are some that we call mob read, a flash mob, where we pick one book and we all read together and talk about it. So it's really interesting. And I also recently joined the Toastmaster Club. So I find that's another place where I can contribute well. And I am passionate about diversity, equality, and equity. So I do my share of political activism by signing petitions, social media posting, and attending rallies. I haven't gone beyond that, but I might, never know. And most of this I started pursuing after taking my early retirement. And most of it occurs on weekends, if you want to know when I do that. I'm also involved for many years in International Hindi Association and its event, and I've served on that executive committee. So that has been good. We bring it in the Kavi Sammelan, the Hasya Kavi Sammelan, which is the humorist and the satirist from India. And that evening always is fun. So, and we also do India International Hindi Day in the Shiva Vishnu Temple, where young children and families come and present things in Hindi language. So it is very nice. And then, of course, there's dance and music and all that. I also have participated and volunteered on FICA, IFUSA, which is India Federation of United States. It is through Bharat Bhai, and that is an amazing initiative. I've just joined him since last year, but I enjoy what he is doing to promote cultural, diversity and understanding around Northeast Ohio. So I love doing that. And on the professional front, I have served on executive board of Cleveland Association of School Psych. So I've been both CASP line editor, an executive team member, and also the president of CASP in 2019-2020 year.
Fascinating.
So yeah,
calling yourself retired, which really makes me wonder, how do you find the time to do all of this? This is...
now I'm becoming lazy, so I have got to start thinking and doing something sincerely, because I used to be so busy, right, all the time, because I had too many things that I was constantly doing, and I've traveled a lot, so I'm not regretting that part. After last 2 years, I traveled to my children. I spent more quality time with my kids. So I did it backwards. See, some moms take early on time off. I did not do that. And so I'm very happy I'm able to do that at this end. They are grown and they both have careers and they're in California, but I do go and spend my time with them. And I visit my mom a lot. So because she's older, so I go at least once a year and stay for a month or sometimes a couple of months with her and take care of her, because my sister takes care of her all the time. So we have to kind of balance it out for her. So yeah, I've been traveling a lot, but I seriously will start thinking of doing something different.
You have led such a rich life in terms of anything that one can think of, whether it's education, whether it's relationships, whether it's embracing new thoughts and diversity. How do you take care of yourself? How do you find that space where you can make sense of it all, stay calm, stay peaceful, stay centered, and appreciate life?
You ask my family, they'll say I'm not calm. That's the honest answer. However, we all do something. And I like that prompt because I read your question also. It said mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. What a great way of, asking that question too, because honestly, we all should look at all four facets, because a lot of time people only talk about the physical fitness and all, but in reality, every one of us, it doesn't matter what stage of life and where we are and what we are doing, we do have to take care of our mental, emotional, spiritual health as much as we do our physical health. So mentally and emotionally, that reading, the writing, which I do more and more of now, the prose and poetry, and singing. Singing has always helped me. So I did classical Indian, Hindustani classical music for a couple of years in Houston, Texas, with a very good guru. And I also took, it was only for 2 years, but she gave me a very good grinding, because I used to sing Bollywood songs all my life in high school and college, but it was completely untrained. It was me singing, and I used to sing. Several people in my family, we all sing. So it was kind of okay for me to sing. But then from her, I learned certain nuances about singing. And I'm always thankful to Chandra for that, my guru. She was amazing. And she was from Hyderabad. And it was such a lucky meeting of minds. I went to a friend's house and she used to take classes with her. And that's how it started. So I definitely love to sing. And then traveling is a huge high for me. And if I'm closer to any destination that has water, that has a very calming effect for me. So my children, rather than them coming to Ohio, they ask me to come to California, because they know that I will be in proximity to water. And so they did, have such amazing holidays planned out for me always. So I thoroughly enjoy that. Spiritually, I'm pretty decent. decent, I would say. I'm not as religious as my father was. I don't think I can even match, because he was not conservative. He was very liberal, but he was very religious, and he lived his life in a certain way. And my mom did too. But I'll be honest, I'm pretty decent about following certain rituals, but I do have special prayers from my religion that I constantly am listening to or reading. There's one in particular early morning, we call it Ayatun Noor. And it just gives me a very calm feeling and inner peace. So I do connect with my religion a lot. I just started reading Najul Balaga. This was a book gifted to us by a friend of ours here in Cleveland, actually. And it is Sermon of Imam Ali. He was the son-in-law of the Prophet. And it's his reflections on our existence, as well as the historical incidents of Islam. So I kind of have always said, I'll read. So I'm happy that I'm at that stage where I have the time. So I've just started reading it, and I plan to finish it. But my plan is to eventually read a good translation of the Quran, the Guru Granth Sahib, the Bhagavad Gita, and Torah, and also the New Bible. I think we've all read Old Bible when we were growing up in the convent school. Like some pieces are here in the moral science lesson, and sometimes, exposure and all that. So I'm aware of all of these, all of these scriptures, and I've heard sayings from each one of them. I've gone to temples and gurudwaras, so I've listened to certain things too. But still, I want to actually read and understand the entire scripture. So I hope and pray that it just doesn't stay as a goal, but like that I actually, because I've started on Najul Balaga, chances are I might do that. And then physical fitness. So that's where this Sarva Gunn Sampann does not apply to me. I'll be honest with you, I'm probably the worst. I do go for treks with my husband because he is an avid trekker, but also very disciplined about physical exercise, and I am not. So I go for walks from time to time, but I'm not at all regular with any routine. I just so that would not be a Sarva Gunn Sampann thing. It's a goal that I failed on for many years, and I'm not very proud of that. However, I'll have to say for my physical health, I do eat healthy. So I'm not into eating all kinds of junk and all. So that I mean, I will sometimes for fun, but like not, I don't have that temptation all the time. So I do have become a little more aware of that. But no, physical thing is just not me.
That's totally fine. You're excused everything that you have wanted to do and have not been able to do. I mean, you've contributed so much, made such an impact in the lives of so many students. That I really feel that, if you go back and read all the religious texts that you want to read, you definitely, I hope you walk away with a sense of, what, I may not have read all this, but I've applied the basic tenets throughout my life in everything I've done. And I think that's what I gather from the conversation I've had with you. Tasneem, what a pleasure. Before we wrap up, any final words of advice for our audience? Anything that you want to talk about?
More than any advice for the audience, I don't know what to say to them. I would say how proud I am of you, Anu, for doing this, because when you were talking about it a few months ago, right, it was just an idea, and I mean, you knew what you wanted to do, but like you were kind of wondering where it will go, and look, it has taken off. I mean, you have people, and there are some amazing people that I listened to the last few times, but also that whole idea of women lifting other women and empowering women, that I salute you for doing that, because especially in marginalized communities, and not that we are marginalized, honestly, brown community usually is the model community all the time, but we do get marginalized in some ways in some places. And by sheer virtue of being from India, right, Indian culture has also certain, how should I say, not restrictions, I wouldn't, because that would be a strong word, but it has a certain way of looking at gender roles for women. So very rarely women get to speak about themselves. And you are empowering not just the professionals, but you're empowering the women who have stayed at home and taken care of, and they have probably done 10 times more work than anybody else, right? So for them to be able to get recognized. So I really, really applaud you for starting this. And, I'm a fan. I will eventually get to every single one of them. I've already got to 3 or 4, and I don't know how many you have done so far. More than 3 and 4, right? At
Yeah,
least.
this is my ninth, podcast.
Wow,
Series.
9th already. Amazing. So you can imagine that would be another one of my goal, along with Bhagavad Gita, Guru Granth Sahib, to listen to every
I'll be
Sarva Gunn
honored. What an
Sampann.
honor for me, Tasneem. When before I started, we had the conversation, and I just felt strongly that Sarva Gunn Sampann is an idea whose time has come. And I think talking to you just emboldened and firmed up my determination to go with.
I'm so
I,
happy.
I really want to thank you for that.
I would love to even help you even further down this, journey and down the road. If ever there was anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to
You
be
have
part
so
of this.
much to share, and not just as a professional in your domain, but also as a person. There's so much for us to learn. So I'm truly humbled and honored and
Me too.
thrilled to have you. And I hope we can have another podcast with you where, we delve into a topic that's dearer to your heart. But I want to take this opportunity, Tasneem, to thank you on behalf.
And thank you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Yeah.
You too. Thank you.